You're watching Government Policy and Your Business, and I'm your host, Ivor Blumenthal. NEASA is the National Employer Association of South Africa. It has 10,000 small businesses who are its members, and those are predominantly, but not exclusively, white-owned small businesses around the country. And joining me now is Mr. Gerhard Papenfus, the brain behind NEASA and its founding CEO. Gerhard, welcome and thank you for joining me on this discussion.
Thank you, Ivor. Thank you for having me.
So, towards the end of 2019, you published an article entitled B-BBEE, A Failing Fantasy, in which you were pretty critical of B-BBEE, bearing in mind that organized business, represented collectively by existing business associations, were at the negotiating table as one of the three social partners and agreed to B-BBEE as the law governing our workplaces. Yeah. Why now, 17 years later, after the implementation of the first B-BBEE scorecard, have you found it necessary, as the largest collective voice of small business in South Africa, to be as critical of B-BBEE or BEE as you've decided to be?
We've been critical of this at all times. But, you know, within the context of a narrative over years, you know, you must give something time to evolve, and you need to give them time to see does it actually work. But I think it is now proved a complete failure, and I think the policies behind this is perhaps the reason for the failing of everything that's around us.
So what about B-BBEE, in your opinion, is not working?
Well, you know what, let's use an example what triggered this particular article. The procurement bill, where the president says that 30% of all contracts beyond 30 million must be going to black-owned, 51% black-owned companies. The procurement must be done within those companies. So the point is that's simply not possible. So what is happening is that white-owned companies, which is the majority of
the pre-existing economy.
Absolutely, and they're there. You can't do anything about it, whether it's right or wrong, they're there. They make a fantastic contribution. They want to make a contribution. But, you know, to require of a company to give away in some other way, 51% of their business in order to qualify simply beyond anything that one can expect. So what's happening? The very guy that is now in line for this for the deal for the particular product goes to a company and procure a particular product, and then when that product reaches the end client, it might be 4, 8, 10 times the price
because
of
all the middlemen are adding on.
Absolutely. So who's paying for that? The taxpayer.
All right, so I want to challenge you on something.
And that is the reason why, to a very large extent, why ASCOM has failed, why SAA has failed, why everything. You can't pay a price other than the right price for a product and expect to survive.
Let me ask you this.
Yes.
17 years ago, these regulations at the time were being promulgated, were being suggested for input and for engagement. At that stage, you were there, NEASA was there. It represented close to 10,000 companies at that time, although you've grown since then. The reality is that civil society was asked for its input, it was asked to come to the table, it was asked to become part of the structure negotiating the scorecard, the first scorecard, and thereafter the subsequent scorecards. On an industry level, and you work specifically in the metal and manufacturing sector, the majority of your members, I believe, but in that sector as well, in terms of how the scorecard affected that sector, there have been more than enough opportunities to sit around the table and to engage so that those targets and those percentages were, let's call them, reasonable. And let me play devil's advocate and say, were you at the table representing the collective voice of your members?
No, we were not there. You know, the constituency of NEDLAC, it was written by the role players of NEDLAC, and they kept particular role players out. I mean, the role players at NEDLAC is an old boys club. There's no doubt about it. Protecting the interests of big business. And since then, it's actually became worse. It is no way. NIASA, the only way that NIASA can get access to NEDLAC is through Business Unity South Africa. And we will be a lost voice there because big boys are driving the NEDLAC agenda from business. But it's also happening on the unit side. SATU cannot get into NEDLAC because SATU and these guys are controlling. So getting into NEDLAC is simply impossibility. So the voice of small business is getting lost completely, and we see the time and again with changes in legislation. And you say, how on earth can you agree on something like that? Because big business is simply insensitive towards certain realities on the ground, and they're making the rules. So we weren't there. In any event, even if we were there, it would have been very difficult to change the narrative at that stage. I mean, transformation had to take place. And you know, you often need to allow something to play out for you to come back and say, look, it was wrong. To tell people in advance something will go wrong doesn't go down. I mean, this was the narrative. This is the model. This is how it must work. And today we see it is a spectacular failure.
Do you know what about B-BBEE needs to change to make it more palatable for your 10,000 members around the country?
The wrongs of the past need to be corrected, but we need to be much more imaginative about it. We need to come up with a better plan. The point is, if you exclude, if my member is a businessman, he pays tax, he pays business tax. With his business tax, the post office and Telkom, to a lesser extent, and Eskom and SAA sustained. I mean, all these bailouts, but when that company wants to sell his product on a fair price to any of these institutions, he can't. Now, that's simply unfair.
Do you not believe that with these answers, with these observations, you are being a disingenuous leader to your member companies who need someone to negotiate a fair pathway into local, provincial and national government tenders, SOE tenders, and in fact into the private sector, which is becoming more and more discriminatory against companies which don't play the BEE game? By simply throwing your hands up in the air and saying we're not participating, are you not being unfair to the members of NIASA who are looking to you for leadership and guidance?
How the question is, well, I think we've proved ourselves to be a very much participating role player. Where we do not participate is in NEDLAC. And it's simply for us to get into NEDLAC is not as an organization with our voice, it's through the BOSA voice. Now, what's happened here? It is an institution that wrote a constitution in a manner that excludes others.
Are you challenging that?
Well, you know, you'll have to go to court and challenge it.
But you're an organization of lawyers.
Well, that is high-level litigation. I must tell you, that's high-level. And you know, when you're up against the state, in this case, because you won't only challenge NEDLAC, you'll challenge NEDLAC, you'll challenge the Minister of Labour, you'll challenge the presidency. All of them will be in and say, no, this is how it works. And it is a club that works well for those that benefit through the system.
So you and I both know that NEDLAC doesn't work well for small businesses because there's no one at the table with the legitimate mandate of small business. You, in fact, are the only organization with as large a membership as you have. Surely you need to continue that fight.
Well, you know what, Ivor, sitting here and I'm listening to you, you think, yeah, well, that is actually the case. The people talking about alternative media, mainstream media, alternative media, we tackle certain challenges through the courts. The very legislation that is allowed into our system through NEDLAC, where the interest of SMMEs in South Africa is totally overlooked, we challenge later on in courts, and we are successful. It would have been wonderful to
have a national challenge.
Have a challenge, well, have an influence to stop the implementation of certain things. But what you have is, at NEDLAC, is businesses which no longer experience the realities of business on the one side. On the other side, you have trade unions who is interested to ignore the interests of business altogether. So you have those that, the socialists on the one side, and they are socialists, and on the other side, business people very soft on socialists. That is the NEDLAC makeup. And the kind of deals they come up with is simply not suitable for the economy. We're talking about SMEs. When you say NIASA represent predominantly SMEs, I mean, SMEs are 95% of the economy. Yeah. And there are SMEs that's extremely strong. That's not a shop on the corner. It's strong, but the fact is, it is a hard route to go into NEDLAC and influence. You know, the biggest fight we have is not the trade unions on the other side, it's business on our side.
Sure. Co-opted business most of the time.
Yeah, co-opted business on your own side, that's the hardest part of negotiation.
Gerhard, we're going to be back on this program in a couple of weeks talking specifically about NEDLAC, about how an organization like NIASA has to be at the table. I'm hoping it will be a panel debate. But in the meantime, it seems to me that B-BBEE has become a verb for many to indicate corruption, greed, and something that has gone very wrong with the reform architecture, with social engineering intended to reimagine the workplace. Perhaps, though, some of this criticism is misdirected. An excuse for being resistant to change, and I know, Gerhard, you're going to love this debate into the future. Perhaps the criticism, if you listen closely, is saying more sometimes about what is happening in the lives of the critics than dealing with the shortcomings of B-BBEE itself. Gerhard Papenfus, thank you so much for joining me here on government policy and your business.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you very much.
The more observant amongst us may say that business, labour and government agreed in 2000 that white businesses must shoulder its part of the national challenge to ensure that previously barred and marginalised black entrepreneurs should be able to buy into and own existing businesses. That black managers with potential should have the opportunity to be recognised in the workplace. That white businesses should shoulder its industrial and sectoral responsibility for funding fees must fall. That white suppliers cannot any longer monopolize the supply chain, and that the social conscience of white business, which it was common cause benefited disproportionately before 1994 and to date, must be harnessed because government cannot transform society for the better on its own.